Welcome to Swisspreneur, a podcast about startup stories and hands-on learnings from experienced entrepreneurs. My name is Sylvan and I will be your host. We're back in San Francisco and we'll meet with Markus Okumus for a second time. Today we're going to talk about hiring and managing people. He has a lot of experience. At a certain point, he had to let go of a whole division, basically 100 employees that he had to fire in one day. We'll of course talk about that, but also about the more fun aspects about how he actually met his wife during a job interview. And also in general, what mistakes that he sees startup founders make repeatedly when it comes to hiring and managing people. He really has a lot of great experiences and stories to tell, and we really enjoyed to talk to him, and I'm sure that there are plenty of learnings that you can take away for your business. As always, there is additional content available on our social media channels, so make sure to check us out on Instagram and Facebook. Before we get started with the episode, I would like to introduce you to SBB Startup. If you think that your company is a good fit for the Swiss Railways, get in touch with them or learn more about their startup programs at sbbstartup.com. Markus, welcome back to the second episode of Swisspreneur. It's a pleasure to have you again.
Thank you.
Today we're going to talk about hiring and managing people. And my first question is, what mistakes do you see Swiss startups making repeatedly when it comes to managing and hiring people?
A challenge for a startup is always how you bring super experienced people on board if you're still small. Mm-hmm. Or you don't have money, or it's just challenging time. And what for us when we are investing in companies is super important is like when you listen to the founder of that company and you listen to his story and what he's doing, and then it's like, wow, I mean, I would love to join this company. This is a very strong indicator. It has to be a very charismatic leader who really drives and is driven by this mission. I think this is a super relevant thing rather than say like, I saw in your CV you studied left or right.
Sure.
So, the founder, a very good founder or leader is a magnet. So you want to spend time next to that person. So I think you have a question.
What actually triggers this feedback or this emotion that you feel, mm-hmm. I think, appeal to this person that you want to work with them? Is it their vision? Is it the way that they communicate, or more a mix of all of that in a certain way?
I think it's a mix. It's really about, and I'm still question mark if this is learnable or not. I think it's, in sports, for example, you have like team leaders who are just naturally born team leaders, who are just driving this team to a level, or a coach who's driving. I think in soccer you can see it very well. For example, coaches, like how you want to be in that team and how you want to squeeze the maximum out of you to just, be part of that incredible story. And I think this is really shifting from like hiring skills towards like, values. At the end of the day, if we have a good link with each other, then, we say like, hey, I would love to work with you. Obviously you have to bring certain skills, but mm-hmm. we decide to go that road. Nobody knows how this road looks like, especially in a startup. Nobody has any idea. You can do like 3-year plans, whatever, P&Ls, but sure. In reality, nobody knows what's happening in 2 months. So if you don't have this bonding at the beginning with a potential employee where you really feel comfortable and it resonates, mm-hmm. I think it's not a good sign. Yeah. Without talking about, obviously you need to have certain skills and experience and so on. But sure. I think this is super important.
Yeah. And do you think that this is something that Swiss startups don't get right all the time or most of the time?
Again, I don't know, to be frank. I think what happens is in a startup, you hire in your network, which is supernatural, and say, I can trust this person, or it's a friend of a friend, and so on, which is great, I think, to start a company with. And I think we talk about it later. While you're scaling up, you're going to need different people for different stages. So at the beginning, everybody has to do everything, so you're together in a boat. Everybody has to, survive in that boat, and everybody has to do each single job. And I think you need this mindset from the beginning in and say, hey, we decided this story, we do it together, no matter what it takes. We want to go there, and then you just go.
Absolutely. I think what's really impressive is that in all your projects, you work together with Jan, your co-founder.
Yes.
How can you make that happen, or what makes you such a strong and successful team?
I mean, the question is how he makes that happen. I think it's harder for him than for me. No,
Why?
kidding. I think with Jan, this is really true friendship we have. Also on a private level, we really know where our strengths from each other. Obviously, during that time, all this period of time where we had like many moments which were super challenging. But we all the time understood each other. We understand what is important for which person, and we support each other in that. And I think there is no single doubt that we are not always making it sooner or later, or left or right, whatever we do. So, and we just have from the skill set, we just complete each other tremendously well. So Jan is more in analytics and operations and rational and numbers and that topics. Also much more the inventor when it comes to products. So science and research and all these topics. And I'm much more on the consumer front, like everything what is how to market the product and how to design the bottle and how to access customers and seeing what is going on in the market. And this combination is tremendously valuable because we look to a company, for example, or a product, and we have pretty much a 360 view about it and say, I saw it completely different from that angle, and he looks from the other angle, and within no time we have like a good overview about the business compared to probably when two developer would look to a product, they would have like, I see this and that, but miss maybe some other aspects.
Sure.
And then just as a person, but it's for me also incredible that during all the time, we all the time share the same values and triggers. And businesses. So it's not only my back was triggering that story. So Jan has his personal experience when it comes to health prevention. And it's clear for us that this is our topic. So it's not like artificially doing research and this is a great opportunity. It's just happening. And I think, this is amazing. And we both complete each other very well.
I think a quote of Howard Marks, he was a guest on the Tim Ferriss podcast a while ago, and he said, a good team has shared values but complementary skill sets. And I think that's a perfect description for the two of you.
I agree. Yeah.
Have you actually specifically talked about your values, or have you written them down somewhere, or how did you, share these and made sure that they were really aligned?
Yeah, I mean, we talk them. We talk about them a lot. And we defined them obviously for our company. So, for example, for Fashion Days, we had 3 values: honest, reliable, and happy. So we really wanted to make it very simple, easy to understand for every employee. And there we really defined these values, and they were everywhere in the company. They were in each email footer. When we had like issues with a topic, or we had to let somebody let go, then we explained all the employees, hey, because of this value, this person was not compliant with what we believe. And people were really starting to be very proud about these values, to live that value, especially honesty in those markets, in emerging markets. From day one, we said like, there is no single supplier, no one ever. We just pay $1 just to bribe them. And this was sometimes took longer to get some things, but this was a very consistent value we had, and we just lived that. And everybody who was against that was out of the company. And people really started, especially in those markets, started to really appreciate that. And these are things we we align all the time, and we adapt it for our new business now, and they're very similar. And I think one very important factor is as well that we have very low egos. So nobody has the feeling like, oh, now I have to be there or have to be there. So we really have low egos, which is simplifying a lot of things.
I can imagine.
Yeah.
How have your values changed over the time? Maybe from students.ch over Fashion Days to Canopei nowadays, or was there no change at all?
I mean, there was a big change, I would say. I would say like Students was just opportunistically operating during university, building up something, not a big plan, just did and felt where to go. Then Fashion Days was much more a rational decision, opportunity, copycat in Central Eastern Europe, with the intent to sell it pretty from the beginning, because we realized we can do that. And then now it's very much in the personal belief and really giving back to people and really empowering people, which is a super important value for us right now, rather than just to build a business and I don't care of employees, I don't care of anything. Obviously the business has to work and has to be successful based on economics,
Sure.
But we respect everybody who is doing something, and we try to be very supportive and appreciate whatever somebody is doing. So it has shifted from very aggressive, maybe younger, exit-driven view for Fashion Days, to a much more purpose-driven thing, which we also want to do not only for like 5 years. So what we do right now, we have a 20, 30 years plan. So this is what we have in mind, rather than just doing short-term something which is not so interesting to us anymore.
Great. What is also pretty interesting or hot topic at the moment is diversity, especially also for founding teams. When looking back at your co-founders at students.ch, you were 4 male co-founders. I know this is always a very also controversial topic, but there are studies that clearly say diversified teams have a better performance. Doesn't matter if it's just male or just female, but diversified teams have a higher success rate, sort of. In what way does diversity play a role when you invest in companies nowadays, but also looking back when you started your companies?
When look back how we started companies, it was just naturally happen. I think there was not a rational decision any time. For Fashion Days, I would say we had 60% women in the company. So in those markets, there are super talented women who run business and drive business. Really unbelievable people who grew from non-managing one person to manage 100 people in 2 years, doing incredible good job. So there was diversity definitely relevant, without being so aware of it as it is today out in the world. And then obviously here in the Bay Area, which is probably one of the most liberal cities in the world, people are much more aware of it. I think in my point of view, an organization has to grow organically or naturally. What I mentioned earlier with this leadership thing. I think the bigger diversity you have, the more perspectives you have, which is definitely missing when you have like a tech development team. When it comes to, a consumer product, they don't have the sense and the feeling of like what it takes to bring this to market. As for example, a woman has a much better understanding. I mean, depends on the product, but like what it takes and how is this emotional purchase driven. So interestingly enough, with Fashion Days, it was, we had 70% female customers. So it was all the time, we tried to all the time getting different opinions. And When it comes to investing in companies, it is a factor, but it's not like a killer factor, I would say. I think a lot of them already are quite diverse when it comes to culture and gender, and which I think it's amazing, and especially when you walk down the street here in San Francisco, you have a diversity which is unbelievable, which is amazing.
And I think that's also something where Switzerland is a couple years behind the Silicon Valley, for example.
Probably, I think Switzerland is already quite international too, but not on a certain level. You know, here you have also diversity on different levels happening. There's so many different people in this area together. For example, we had a dinner or a party at our home 2 weeks ago with about, we calculated we had like 20 different nations on like 60, 70 people. Was incredible. So it's just a melting pot, much more in general, US obviously, than Europe or Switzerland. But yeah, it's...
When you actually hire people, how does the job of actually hiring them evolve from an early stage company to a much more established later stage company? Because you had experience in both areas of that.
Yeah, it's interesting because when you see a company grow, and in e-commerce, what we did is like you can pretty much look to revenues. So like 10 million revenues, then 30 million revenues, and then 80 million or 100 million revenues requires completely different people. Or completely different is a little bit extreme, but what you see is that you all the time think a company grows organically. So you just grow and grow. But in reality, what is really happening is that you jump to next. If you want to go to next, double your revenues or triple your revenues, you basically jump to the next level rather than growing to the next level when it comes to people. So what we realized, like, you know, we were fortunate. We had a management team quite from the beginning who was able to grow together with us. We all could learn from each other at Fashion Days to $150 million revenue company or euros. But oftentimes you realize some people, they're not able to grow or to evolve anymore. And then you just have to replace them. And which, you know, is painful because, you know, you were in the boat together for maybe like 2 years, 3 years. I say, hey, listen, now we are switching the boat and we need just like more people, and we cannot just every day talk to each other anymore. So we have now 100 people on the boat, which requires totally different communication processes and so on, which is super relevant. So I think what we did is, trying to find people with experience who have done this before. I think this is super relevant, that you have somebody who has, if you want to grow from 30 to 100 million, then you have somebody who has run a 100 million revenue company before. Because he knows or she knows what it takes. Because if it's for everybody greenfield and new, super hard. So I think again, it's rather, it's more about finding a person who has done that with the right values and, aligned with what you're doing, rather than skills you're hiring, that you say, I don't care, I just now need a person who has done this before. And oftentimes you get rid of values when you see the skills, because in that moment you're desperate. So you want to grow or you have to grow. And when you hire out of being desperate, it's never a good thing. So recruiting, and this is what we did at Fashion Days, we had a certain moment, I think I had like per week 10 interviews permanently. So we started to continuously interviewing people, that you really understand what is out in the market, who is good, how good is your own team, what you find on the market, so continuous interviewing people is a super relevant job, which a CEO should all the time dedicate time to, because this will really drive his company to the next level.
That's something you should be doing all year long, basically.
All year long. In my point of view, publish job ads and continuously scan candidates.
How much percentage of your time did you allocate to this task of hiring people and taking interviews?
I mean, at that time, I think like 1 to 2 hours a day, I would say.
Wow. Yeah.
You know, I mean, I had several interviews a week, let's say it like this.
Sure.
So, which was super important for me, and also for Jan and everybody in the management, that we just continuously scan people.
Absolutely. I think it's Ben Horowitz who wrote in his book, The Hard Thing About Hard Things, is that whenever you triple in the size of your employees, sort of your whole organization structure needs to be rebuilt because it sort of starts to break down. So from 3 co-founders, for example, to a team of 10, and then from 10 to 30, and from 30 to about 100, you face big challenges when it comes to communication, to how you make decisions, how you organize your company. Can you walk us a bit through that process, how you dealt with that with Fashion Days, for example?
I mean, this was all the time a challenge, obviously. We grew so fast on different locations in all these different cultures, which sometimes didn't like each other so much. So it was good to be Swiss sometimes, to be neutral. This was a challenge. So, you know, I think communication is always a challenge in every organization. And for us, what was super hard, you know, from moving out from this, hey, Silvan, can you quickly do that? Or, hey, by the way, I met this guy, it's fine, Tuesday's fine, kind of communication, to Slack or whatever you have today. We had an intranet at that time, you know, and process whatever, you standardize and take out a lot of informal layers in the communication. And this switch is super difficult, especially when you're in a hyper growth phase.
Takes a lot of time.
Takes a lot of time, and you know, like when you go to the process, you know, then what happened is at that time, a lot of people started to write a lot of emails, you know, long emails, and send emails back and forth with 50 people in copy, which is highly inefficient communication. Thanks to Slack, this is has been improved, but this is super challenging, and I don't know if there is a clear answer to that. I think it's this group dynamic, and this what we all the time try to is really through this value and this leadership, you know, driving this through sales. Sales was for us a very strong motivator as well. We had screens everywhere, you know, and could see like today's sales, and it was like we had like a how we call it, info screen. So everybody had it on the mobile, and you could quickly real-time check in what are your daily sales numbers. Yeah. So these are like soft tools basically, which were aligning the organization. However, in the daily operation challenges was really hard to manage and to basically all the time lag behind of the organization. You know, if you build something, you already would know, you know, a new tool for the next step, and how to optimize now that. And now we have to ship more, 20,000 orders a day. So how we ship from like 5,000, how we do this gap switch now. So I think it's continuously shifting. And what we all the time try to do is like, we had all the time, like, I think quarter goals, which were simple to understand. So we said like, okay, this quarter we focus on returns, reducing returns, improving this and improving that everybody could understand what was the main goal, instead of like, 50 KPIs. Yes. And we should improve each KPI, but, you know, what do you focus on? So we really had project names, you know, gave them emotional names, and started to boost it out to all employees with internal newsletters, with we had company events once a year. We brought all the employees together talking about that. And then when we were in locations, we really talked a lot directly to end to employees, which is I was all the time in the warehouse. I was all the time. It's really important to really feel the base, which is hard when the more people you are.
Absolutely.
And to see where, what communication do they really get from when you start communicating it. It end up that they probably get like 20% of what was the idea of what you wanted to communicate.
You said nowadays you would probably use Slack, but from my personal experience, I also think that Slack sort of brings back this informal real-time communication. So it might save a lot of emails, but it still can be a huge distraction if used wrongly. Was there some best practices or some, let's say, actions that you took that worked very well for you that you would sort of be able to share as good learning in a positive way that actually made your communication easier or your organization easier?
Best is face-to-face. So you cannot replace the power of having people in a room and discuss about something.
But with 800 employees, that's a bit tricky.
It's hard. So then it goes down, obviously, video calls. I think phone is always better than texting. Yeah. Slack, I think it's an improvement towards emails, but it cannot be the only communication tool. I think people don't call enough, people don't talk to each other enough by phone, face-to-face. This is super important because there is a lot of other communication going on than just a rational fact. Like, how are you doing today and how you feel? How was your weekend? Which you do in a call, in an email or in a Slack message, you don't talk about that. So, and this is super important for team building and, being together on that boat. And when you reduce that layer and only have rational facts, it's very difficult to really bond as a team through distance.
Sure. Talking about layers, how many different people or not people, probably management levels did you set up at your 800 employee company? How did you organize your management team and what did the organization structure look like overall?
I think we had probably three layers. Okay. I think.
That's not that many for 800 people.
But I'm maybe four. I can't 100% remember. And then we had a matrix organization, which was challenging, obviously, because we had like all these local decentralized organizations. We had a centralized organization. So we tried to deal with that, but I would say it was all the time a challenge to really live it. And then when you change something that people understood, now I have to report for this topic in a matrix. I have to talk to this manager. Now I have to about this topic to this manager. And again, we all the time try to bring these managers then of the company together. We try to do education for them. So yeah, it's something we grew naturally. We felt right at that given moment. And when we felt it's not right, we just adapted it and changed it. And I think this is, while you're doing something, it doesn't mean if it doesn't work and if it's not efficient, you should just immediately drop it compared to just, we decide now and we have to stick to it for 1 year. Right. So just adapt it when you feel like. Yeah.
So there is no magic bullet or best organization
at least I haven't found it.
Ever. Okay.
I haven't found it yet. If you if you find it, let me know. But I think it's now because like each organization is at the end of the day is different and has different dynamics and hard to copy. So in general, maybe for organizations, what we really believe in is kind of a cell system rather than top-down approach. I think, or what we see now with companies we're investing in, they're all different cells. And I think in a cell, you have a super efficient way to collaborate rather than you grow over 20, 30 people. So I think the cell system where you have like one person who leads that cell, who basically manages everything in that cell, or the team members in that cell manage everything, is super high efficient, because I still have this communication save on, you know, what should we eat for lunch, for example. So one of us is just grabbing lunch. But if you have an organization with 800 people and you have to organize lunch, it starts to be a huge project, you know. And you can see this in the army, US Army, you know, like it's a huge logistic thing where there's, you know, there are some troops which are just organized in cells, and you just buy something around the corner. So I think this is an organization structure which I tend to believe that this is a very much more efficient way than. But obviously, if you are a huge company with 100,000 employees, it's probably no other way to just do it in a high carry.
How would you then split up these cells? Do you do that topic-wise, or do you have, I don't know, like sales team, a marketing cell? How do you split up the cells to make them work efficiently?
Yeah, I think you know, like when it comes to markets, obviously, I think a market has to be quite independent. You know, like when you're operating different markets, you should really have maybe like a R&D centralized, you know, with product development and everything. But the market, how they communicate it, how they price it, how they approach it, should be very independent, because they know best what is working in a market or what not. And also with fashion, as you all the time had this in marketing, for example, is what do we centralized?
Right.
How much localized, you know? How you ensure your brand awareness in all these markets, or, you know, brand positioning, whether like they said, hey, in this market, this is working, this is not working. So I tend to believe that, you know, really independent, relatively independent cells in a market is highly efficient, whether when you need to have a PR agency who serves all the market, you maybe have in this market not a good PR agency, maybe in this one a good one, whether like the local cell just can choose the best PR agency in that market. So I think this is super relevant, that this independency of the cell. It can be a backbone in the back, you know, like administration and payroll and whatever, accounting and product development. But I think the more independence you give on the front, the more efficient and better your setup.
And then how do your companies that you invest in manage the overall collaboration of these cells? Who is responsible for that, and how do they do that?
I mean, for us, it's like, you know, we invest in these companies, and we are working right now on ways of how we can basically align these cells with each other. Not align because they're independent companies, but we will obviously want to bring head marketings together and like the CEOs together, that they can learn from each other. We organize 2 events now, one here in the Bay Area, one in Zurich as well, for just industry people, bringing them together, bringing entrepreneurs in, bringing head of innovations in from insurance companies and so on. Right. Just that this interaction is happening, that this partnership's happening there. So we are rather building platforms for that than facilitate that, because if you do not have an interest as CEO of company X to talk to me, then you should not talk to me, because there is no interest. So we cannot force it, but we can create like platforms where people and CEOs and potential partners can collaborate with each other. And this is what we want to drive and empower, facilitate these events, which simplifies hopefully the life of the entrepreneurs.
Cool. You always have to deal with people, not only when you're managing sales, but also just when hiring or managing people in general. What was the toughest moment that you faced in regards of managing people?
I mean, you know, there was, we did a lot of hiring, and we also had to let go a lot of people. And one time, you know, like we grew incredibly fast in terms of employees, but we grew very inefficient. So over time you could increase efficiency, and you know you're using less people. And I remember one time in Poland we had content production with these photo studios, one in Romania, one in Poland. and there were like about 100 people, and we had to shut down, or decided to shut down the operations due to costs and inefficiencies. We prepared everything with HR managers, and it was you have to talk to the government when there are more than, I think in that case, 50 people or 60 people, you let more of 60 people go, then you have to involve them. So you have to kind of a social plan, and then I was communicating it to them, and you see all these people in front ahead of you, and which you hired, and maybe like 2 months before, we acquired a company, and then basically we had to let them go. And 2 months ago I said, hey, we're going there, and this is what we achieve, and we do it all together, and we're a team, whatever. And then 2-3 months later you realize you cannot do that. And this was tough, you stay in front of them and talk about, hey, we shut down the organization, and then you have lawyers next to you, and you have HR people next to you, and then they're in the one-to-one discussions, and you just want to be very human, and it's not natural to just do that, So on the other side, it's part of building a business, because due to that you could stabilize the other 500, 600 jobs. So if you will not do that, so I think this is one example, and then we had like individual examples with fraud cases, employees who we figured out they were stealing or did some shady deals with suppliers, this kind of stuff, or stealing in the warehouse, where you have to be very clear and direct. And I think when you let a person go, you can it's never a pleasant feeling, but over time, as we all the time stick to the law and respected the law, which was not usual in those markets. So we all the time said, okay, you get another salary according to law and so on. So people knew when they got fired that we had a very good conversation for that bad situation, actually, in a sense of they knew that we are treating them according what we agreed and what is in the contract. So this was also giving us, as again company values, quite a good image that we are just fair and treat people fair. And I think this was an important element as well.
These company values, they really seem to be the solid basis and a very important basis of basically everything you do. You mentioned fraud cases or other bad things that could happen in these moments. How do you actually test these values when you hire people? How do you try to figure out that the person that you have a job interview right now is actually not committing fraud 3 months from now? I know this is very tricky, but how did you do that?
If you 100% figure it out, call me. I mean, it's difficult. So I think it's very much about trying to understand the human rather than the professional person next to you. I would say the best would all the time be like, you go to play tennis, or ideally you go on holidays, like 3 days, and then you really learn a lot about a person. There are little things you can figure it out. For example, where you meet people, how does the office look, like how they're dressed, you can understand some value topics like that. But also how they speak, what is important to them, like you constantly try to figure out, is it the money who drives that founder, or is it the purpose, what he really wants to achieve to drive this company? And I obviously love the purpose, like when somebody's really driven by that topic, and it's not just like a copycat. So although I did this as well, but today I really believe that you have to have a true personal belief in what you're doing, because an entrepreneur is not building something for 2 years. Everybody thinks like, this is a great opportunity. I have to be fast. I do it. I sell it. That's it. Yep. In reality, to build a company takes 7 years, 10 years to really build a good, decent company. This is a lifetime decision. So basically, let's say you live 80 years, if you decide what you're doing with 10 years of your professional career life, it's super relevant, So, and if you're not having fun doing that, or if you're not connected to your industry or whatever, you should not do it. You definitely should not do it. If you just run after an opportunity, I don't believe, I would not invest in that. Can be super successful, don't get me wrong,
Sure.
But I don't believe in that. I really want to have entrepreneurs where I can sit have a dinner table and have really deep, meaningful conversations with very, very value-driven. This is what really resonates.
These points that you spoke about are all pretty personal impressions. So testing people when you hire them on these values, is this something that will sort of be summed up in your gut feeling about the person? Or are there really like rational points or a rational checklist that you do or did run before deciding who you hire or which company you invest in?
I mean, there is all the time a rational part, which I think you have to do and do certain due diligence, obviously, to ensure that, things are properly done.
What did you do in that regard?
Due diligence?
Yeah, like when hiring people.
When hiring people, I think it's very basic stuff. It's good to call former employees. It's good to check their social network appearance. Simple things, what friends they have, if they post, what kind of pictures they post. Gives you a very clear first impression of a person. And then I would just talk about, what is your dream and what is really bothering you, why you're doing what you're doing, and trying to understand, do you have kids, do you have family, where do you live, what is important, what is your philosophy in life, try to ask these kind of questions, which happens naturally in the companies we're investing in, because a lot of these products you're investing in, they're related to healthy living or, conscious living, which simplifies a lot of things, because you not necessarily only have entrepreneurs who are just purely money driven, because there are many cases in the companies investing in purpose driven. So you have like a natural selection out of just by selecting a certain industry. And then it's like also my partners who then talk to this person and say, hey, listen, my impression was like this, and I felt he may this, and the more people who see a person, the better the better view I think you can have. And then what we want to do is as well sending entrepreneurs we invested into some leadership trainings. So this is something we also try to set up to really develop skills which you may, when you run a business, not necessarily have time for, or so obviously if they want, sure. This is how we can contribute.
Did you also have a specific rule internally for your management team when you were hiring someone, or now when you invest in companies, that you say all of the management team have to be okay or have to agree to hire that person when they spoke to that person?
Yeah, I mean, we have in our investment committee now, if one says no, then there is a no. So if we are not all excited and positive, it's a no. Because it's, we are checking so many companies and it's, you really have to be bullish at that moment about this company, and team-wise and product-wise and market-wise, that this is a cool thing. If you have doubts at that time, even if you interview, it's very similar if you interview a person. If you have one doubt, don't hire this person. Even though it's like, oh, now I have to find another one, whatever. But it will be much more painful having this person on board, realizing after 2 months or 3 months, he's not going to perform. You will lose much more time. So be very selective in who you really bring into your company, or who you're investing in. which is super relevant.
Is there a certain thing that you did to train this sort of gut feeling to also, understand it better or have a better judgment with your gut feeling? Probably doing more and more interviews help, but was there anything else that you did to strengthen that?
I think it's a lot of interview helps. So I for sure interviewed a few hundred people, and same on company side. The more entrepreneurs you see, the better understanding you get. Sure. And then I think it's while you personally develop, you start to, certain things become more important to you. So, for example, in my case, it's like it's important how you eat. Because how you eat is for me an indicator, in a sense of like how conscious you are about weight, about if you just eat sugar and drink Coke the whole day. Sure. This is an indicator. So there we probably are going to have a mismatch when it comes to values. Now you can say, okay, if it's a developer, maybe it's a different story, but these are personal beliefs I have, and I want to share those obviously with my employees or close people, because I will spend time with them, and we drive a certain vision to make people healthier and happier. And obviously sugar, too much sugar is not leading us there. If you do that and you consume a lot of sugar and tell to the consumer something else, then there is a value mismatch. Absolutely. And I think these little things you try to understand, you try to figure out. Mm-hmm.
When dealing with people, we talked now about the not so good parts a couple minutes ago. There are also a lot of beautiful stories that you can share and that you live through together. One of these stories is you met your wife during a job interview. Yes. Can you tell us how that happened?
Well, this is a funny story. So we had one of these days where we interviewed 12 people. So it was in Bucharest in a hotel. So we had one candidate after another came in. And then my today's wife, Krina, she came to the interview, and she replaced actually a candidate. So a colleague of her is supposed to come, and she couldn't manage, and she replaced her. And we were talking about our business, and she told me, I think one of the first sentences, she said that this business is never going to work. She was in fashion retail at that time, and she didn't like that everything is going to shift. I told her like everything is going to shift online, and I was like, and she had this romantic thinking of retail, which got quite disrupted. And somehow I couldn't follow her exactly what she said, because we were more like attached to each other. And then, I continue with my other interviews, and we didn't have any contact. She didn't apply or, wanted to have the job. I'm still not sure if we offered her the job or not. Mm-hmm. But anyhow, and then 1 year later, we just met through social network again, and we started talking, and then now we are together for 8 years, I think, and it's amazing. And, again, like when you start a business, you don't think of that, it's like, I gave you another example, I think, earlier when we lost a person, in an organization, and you suddenly, you have, people who get married in the company. We had a dating platform. We had 2 people sitting in the same office. They got matched on our dating platform, where we didn't know if it's a good algorithm. So they were together. So this was an incredible story. So there are a lot of things happen, and you realize that it's life. It's not just running or building a company. It's really about life. And this is super beautiful. I was on weddings where 2 employees met, and awesome. This is, for them, it's like, hey, Markus, you changed my life because of your company. I met my wife. They have kids now, and which is, very emotional and amazing, very beautiful.
You didn't end up working together, because your wife didn't got a job offer, didn't accept it.
Yeah.
We don't know.
We don't know.
Do you
ask
think,
her.
Okay, I won't. Do you think in general it's a smart thing to hire people who are close to you, like friends or family members, or is this something that you think should better be avoided?
It's tricky. It's can go very well, can go very wrong, and for sure you risk friendship if you cannot deal with that. So on the same time, it's natural, that when you know people and trust people and say, hey guys, let's sit in the boat together, let's go there, that you do it in your environment, and I think when both can have the respect to the business and to rationalize things and not mixing emotions or splitting emotions with rational facts, which is hard, or ego driven, and now I should be the founder or I should be the CEO of this company, then obviously your friendship is gone, or probably gone. So I think it's there is no right or wrong. For sure, the case is also with Jan. It was a perfect example, but there are other cases probably that doesn't turn out.
My last question for today is, your role has evolved from being founder, co-founder, to a more passive role as investor and advisor, board member. In what way has this also changed the way that you now manage people? You are much less involved in operations, in the daily business. In what way has this changed the way that you manage or interact with people?
It's very difficult because if you're used to run a business and take decisions, and then you start to invest in a company, and some companies we have been involved in, we were also supporting them operationally. So you basically have like different heads. So you're on one head, you're an investor, which has one perspective. And then you are in operations. So you bond with the team, but you're also an investor. So you have these different heads, which it's really hard to distinguish between those. And then it's like really hard to figure out how much should you let go and how much should you say now. As an entrepreneur, you say like, now there is a problem, which you all the time have or challenges in a company. Now I dive right in, I solve that problem. Once you're doing that, you cannot focus on anything else anymore because you're in fully operations.
Sure.
So you may don't take the responsibility of the investor anymore, or board member, whatever, more on a strategic level, because you dive in. And this is a very, very tricky part. So we had to learn we cannot be in operations anymore, which we all the time also thought this is our skill and this is our strength. But on the same time, if you're in operations, you're not the CEO. So you cannot just take decisions. So you basically have to integrate in a team. So we decided the best way for us is investing in these companies. We are sometimes sitting in the board, supporting them in whatever way. If there is an issue with that company, we are willing to jump in for like 3 months or for a dedicated time and solve something until somebody new comes into the company. But being in an operational role is definitely not something we can do. And this was a difficult transition. It's like, I don't know, when Roger Federer once is coach, it totally changes the game. It's like you have to say what others have to do, but you cannot say too much because you have to. The entrepreneur, the CEO, has to run their business in their way, which is hopefully better or probably better than what you have in mind. So it's a really. It's like I all the time compare it with my daughter. When she started to learn to walk. You cannot just hold her hand all the time, because she has to fall to learn how she can walk and how to balance. When I would hold her hand all the time, it would take much longer to walk. But you have to let her fall. And I think it's very similar to a company. So right now we are fine and good just supporting them and helping them and investing in them. And if there really is a fire in the company, we are willing to if we can, or one of us take a role for like a very short given period of time, but not fully in operations. But it's a challenge to transition.
I think we can be very curious to see how these challenges turn out and what your investments will sort of produce and show as results in the near or long-term future. Markus, it has been a pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much for sharing all these great stories and giving us these valuable insights. And again, all the best for your future projects. And I'm looking forward to talking or being in touch with you very soon again.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, and it was a pleasure having this chat with you, Silvan.
Thank you very much for listening to today's episode. If you enjoyed the content, we would be thrilled to receive your rating on Apple Podcasts. Next week, we will already be back with a new Q&A session, meaning we answer your questions. If you haven't signed up already, you can become a member of Swisspreneur to hand in your questions, and we will answer them with our experts out of our network. So make sure to tune in to an all-new episode next week, where we answer the questions of our community, and I'm sure that you can take away some exciting learnings for your business and for your career. See you next week.